Hello, my friends. I am in the Aconcagua Valley, in a village called San Esteban. And with the Andes right behind me, and the Aconcagua Peak right behind the mountains, the highest peak in the Andes, and that gives the name to the wine region that we will explore in this documentary. It does not only provide the name. The melted snow from the Aconcagua gives birth to the Aconcagua River that defines the Aconcagua Valley all the way from the Andes to the Pacific Ocean. As we will see later, Chilean wine regulators have included distinction between wine producing areas according to their location with respect to the Andes and the coast, as it sets important climatic and geological characteristics so important for the elaboration of wine. These new appellations are being used by many producers now, particularly in the Aconcagua region, as it literally runs from the Andes all the way to the coast. They are the Andes for vineyards close to the main mountain range in the east of Chile, Costa, meaning coast, for those close to the Pacific Ocean, and Entre Cordilleras, meaning in between ranges, for those somehow in the middle. Aconcagua vines are very diverse, from internationally recognized full-body reds in the Bordeaux style in the Aconcagua Valley to fresh and sophisticated whites in the coastal areas of the Casablanca and San Antonio valleys. I am sure that you will find this region very exciting, and I hope that you enjoy the journey. Aconcagua is one of the 5 principal wine regions of Chile. It encompasses all wine growing areas in the Valparaiso region and goes all the way from the foothills of the Andes, where the denomination of origin Aconcagua Valley is located, to the Pacific Ocean, where we find the denominations of origin Casablanca Valley and San Antonio Valley. The latter is closest to the ocean and includes several subzones, the most famous of which is the Leyva Valley. Wine elaboration in the Aconcagua region started as a result of the efforts of diversification and expansion of Chilean wine elaboration beyond the Central Valley in the 80s. Indeed, the red wines of the Aconcagua Valley DO have earned international acclaim, particularly since a wine by Viña Errázuriz, called Seña, was placed ahead of both Chateau Lafite and Chateau Margaux in a blind tasting held in Berlin in 2004. That fact alone has become a milestone for the Chilean wine industry, similar to what the Jasmine of Paris represented for Californian wines. The Casablanca and San Antonio denominations near the coast are great examples of the expansion efforts mentioned before, with most wines planted there in the mid-80s and 90s. The areas have become internationally recognized for their fresh and sophisticated Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay wines, among the whites, as well as incredibly good Pinot Noir wines, a grape which thrives in its cooler climate. Hi, I'm in San Esteban in the Aconcagua Valley, and I'm with Mario Bertoni, who is Chief Winemaker of In Situ Family Vineyards. We are in a very peculiar place, at the top of a hill where you have all your vineyards. We are here because I'd like you to explain to me the association of the ancient culture that you have from this area in Aconcagua that you include in your wines you make.
Basically, we are at the highest part of the hill Pida Huon. It's an island hill that is in the middle of our vineyard. We once walked around and we found paintings made by ancient civilizations, mainly pre-Columbian, which were Incas. They were made in the stones. There are around 500 drawings like this one here. And the story goes that in this part there were ancient civilizations, part of the Incas, who came to the hill to give thanks to their divinity, be it the sun, the water, etc. And throughout this part there are different drawings, and it turned into an archaeological park.
This one in particular is like a seashell, which you have adopted on its honor in one of your wines.
This is on the label of our main wine, El Cono.
Well, I'm here in Loabarca with Marilu Martin, who is the founder and owner of Casamarin, who is one of the first wineries to produce wine outside of the Central Valley here in Chile. Marilu, thanks for receiving us in your home. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
You were one of the pioneers, not just as a woman, but pioneers in general of the first Chileans making wine outside the Central Valley, at a time in which no one did that outside the Central Valley. How did you decide to do this?
Because as I was working, watching customers outside, I realized that Chilean wine was considered good, but foam. Foam means a wine without much variety, a wine that's always the same, very flat. And it was because everything came from the Central Valley. There was no terroir, there was nothing. That is, white, red, and the rest of the varieties that were there were all in the same location. So the foreigners would come for a cheap wine. Good, cheap, reliable. And that created a very big stigma for us. So for all of us who have encouraged to develop new niches, new places, it hasn't been hard to later go out and sell at higher prices. It's the objective of all wineries. It has now been achieved in these last 30 years. It's been achieved and passed on, but still, we have an average price for Chilean wine of $30 a case. So we still have a hard time with the idea of selling at $50 because it's worth it. We have very good wines, especially now. I mean Chile as a whole. We've discovered so many sectors in the north, in the south, up in the mountains, next to the sea.
If you were looking for diversity, you went to the most antagonistic side of the Central Valley, which is within the Aconcagua region. Where we are, the San Antonio Valley, is the part closest to the Pacific, which has a climate influence, making it one of the coldest in Chile, it seems to me.
That's right.
The grapes that were grown in the Central Valley would not work here. You had to look for other grapes. How did you decide the grapes you choose and why?
Well, when I decided to do this project in this area, I chose it because I was already familiar with the area. When I was little, my father bought a field here. It's not the one I'm using as a vineyard because his, which is still there, has no water, 0 water. So when I decided on this place, it was because of what I saw. The people who lived here had very few fruits. They also had very few vegetables. But everything was really good, very pretty, very big, and super tasty, kind of marking a distinction. Mainly it was the famous lettuces of this area, which are still here. So I said, why not grapes? When I studied in university, the first class I had on viticulture, the first thing the professor said was that the vine is the noblest plant on the planet. It adapts to any type of climate, soil, everything. It gives different characteristics depending on where you are. But if you do it well, you get a very distinctive product from the place you've grown them in. But what costed me more than anything was the project, which takes so much time, and you have to put a lot of money into it. Not to mention it's a project that you will see success in the long term.
Not only were you the first to leave the Central Valley, you have also been recognized for the understanding of the land, the expression of the terroir in the wines, which are your characteristics. In fact, within the denomination of origin of the San Antonio Valley, there are already subdivisions. One is the Lleida Valley, which is beginning to be widely recognized, and another is precisely Lo Abarca, which is what you helped create. You are the only producer in this denomination. How did this happen?
When we did our first harvest here, which was in 2003, we marked a status. We marked a level of wines which were mainly Sauvignon Blanc. We marked this when the rest of the Sauvignon Blanc in the Central Valley were of much lower quality and price. So I started asking the government to grant me a denomination of origin, because we were the only vineyard here, and we were making a very different wine. In Wine Spectator and other English papers, it said that since Sauvignon Blanc of Casa Marin reached the market, it changed the level of Chilean Sauvignon Blanc. All the big wineries started to say, well, let's go. Let's see if we can place our wine there. This is what started a massive production of Sauvignon Blanc, and now the quality of Sauvignon Blanc is very high.
I think so, it's very clear. I'm going to thank you because now we're going with your son, who is going to explain more.
And this is the best. I have a new generation here, which is the most important thing. I was just in the vineyards in Italy, and everyone who I spoke to had generations, the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th.
I am still in the Aconcagua Valley, right next to the Aconcagua River, which runs almost dry during the winter. I will tell you about the climate, geology and soils of the Aconcagua region, which are all aspects directly related to the Aconcagua Peak and the Andes. I mentioned at the beginning that the distinctive appellations of Andes, Costa and Entre Cordilleras relate best to the Aconcagua region. This is because the region runs all the way from the Andes into the coast, offering perhaps a greater variety of soils and microclimates than any other wine region in Chile. In general, one can say that the central part of the Aconcagua region is hot and dry, with the areas in the east end cooled by cold air descending from the Andes, while the cooling influence from the Pacific Ocean makes some areas in the Casablanca and San Antonio valleys among the coldest in Chile. The reality is more complicated than that, as the climate of the region is very dynamic. The cold breezes descend from the Andes during the night, while the cool air from the Pacific Ocean arrives in the mornings as the hot air in the east rises when the dry land heats up. As producers look to produce fresher, more complex wines with lower levels of alcohol, they have started to move away from the valley floor to cooler sites on the hills and at the eastern and western ends of the region. In the coastal areas, morning fogs and ocean breezes create conditions that are ideal for the production of fresh white wines. Closer to the Andes, vineyards rise up to around 1,000 meters above sea level and more, resulting in sunny and warm days, but cooler nights and a high diurnal range that prolongs the ripening of the grapes.
We have a very classic Mediterranean climate. All precipitation is concentrated in autumn and winter, more and more only in the winter. And here we are on average between 850 and 980 meters above sea level. There is a marked influence from the mountain range. There's more of an influence from the breeze of the mountain range than from the coast.
From my understanding, the breeze gives freshness to the wines and the altitude a longer maturation.
It is mainly given by the thermal amplitude in the period of maturation, which is the most important period, or one of the most important. And here, the thermal amplitude ranges from 15 to 20 degrees between day and night, right? In the morning we can have 15 to 10 degrees, and in the afternoon we can have 30 to 35 degrees.
Rainfall has decreased significantly with climate change. The river flows thin, almost without water. You told me before that it's 100-200 millimeters per year?
Yes, this is the Aconcagua River. In this area, on average, a normal year gives 300 millimeters per year. This year we were at 100 millimeters. Last year we were at 100 millimeters. Right now, which is the rainy season, which you've seen, we've had 40 millimeters accumulated. What saves us is the accumulation of snow. The reserve is right there, and it allows us to have water in the summer.
Hi, I'm in Casablanca and I'm with Andrés Campana, who is an enologist in the winery Kingston's Family Vineyards. Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm very well.
Well, we are in a beautiful vineyard. The fruit was picked a few months ago, but the leaves are still on during the fall. It's spectacular. Here you can see very well what the land of Casablanca is like, the rolling hills and such. But I want you to tell me a little bit about the weather. How would you describe the climate here in this region?
Well, the weather here is classified as a cold valley climate. This is typical. We are in the most coastal condition, westernmost of the valley of Casablanca. We are only 15 or 16 kilometers away. So this cloudiness is characteristic of the area, especially in this place. If you move a little towards the interior, towards Santiago, within the same valley of Casablanca, warmer climates begin to appear. So this is one of the coolest parts of Casablanca. There's a cloudiness that's always constant and also a lot of humidity.
So the mist that is seen in the distance, is that there all day, or is it just there in the morning and then disappears throughout the day? Or is it constant?
Well, usually it's there until noon, until 1 or 2 in the afternoon, sometimes a little earlier. But it's there every day. So you can expect many cloudy mornings here. In the end, this period lengthens a little. It starts a little later, and the ripening is a little slower, more delicate, which for the varieties, such as Pinot or Chardonnay, that usually mature a little quicker. That lengthening in the process ends up giving you a little bit higher quality.
I'm here with Felipe Marin, family owner of Casa Marin here in San Antonio Valley, in the denomination of origin Loa Barca. Hello Felipe, delighted to be here. Thanks for having us. How are you?
A pleasure. Very good.
Hey, the San Antonio Valley in general and your denomination here in the town forms it. It's very cold. It is one of the coldest places in Chile in terms of wine. Is it because of your proximity to the ocean? Can you explain the weather to me?
Of course. Well, here we are indeed in a depression of the coastal mountain range. The ocean is about 4 or 5 kilometers from here. And the sea, as we know, moderates the temperature a lot. And there are low temperatures because the currents come from the Antarctica. What happens is that the wind blows this way, and it gives temperatures during the summer of maximum 25 degrees. It is a cold climate. It is a climate in which the vines take a long time to mature. The time it takes is very long.
In the Aconcagua Valley wine region, the vineyards follow the course of the Aconcagua River, transporting fresh meltwater and minerals down from the mountain peaks and defining the diverse topology of terrains, aspects and compositions. Although not directly touching the ocean, the Casablanca Valley sees the influence of cooling winds from the Pacific, with hills to the north and east restricting the humidity from escaping and creating one of the Chile's coldest wine-producing areas. Finally, the San Antonio Valley, right to the south of the Casablanca Valley. It is an area defined by gentle rolling hills to the west of the coastal range and is heavily influenced by the ocean. Being all valleys, the soils are predominantly alluvial, with a sedimentary nature. Mario, we are in a vertical section of the terrain in which you can see how shallow the ground is above. These rocks reminds me of Priorat, La Licorella. Surely it's not the same, I'm not a geologist, but it's very important. Some roots are visible. This, I suppose, gives all the character to your wines.
So for a bit of history, basically we are on the Paidahuan Hill. This hill is created by the uplift of the Andes mountain range, which we can see there. We're talking about around 120 million years. This was the Cretaceous period, and mainly, they're this red rock called andesites. It belongs to the andesite rocks. They are rocks disintegrated over time. You can basically break them. The particularity is that there is less soil, there is less fertility. That implies that the roots can go searching for nutrients between all of these layers. And this gives a very specific personality to what we get from here. This part here is older. A lot of broken stone, very little layer of soil. We are talking about no more than 40 centimeters, and in the foothills, we are at 60 centimeters of soil, around 60 to 80 centimeters.
All right, well, I'm in Casablanca, in Chile, and I'm with Pedro Vega, who is the viticulturist in charge of all the vineyards of Terranoble. Pedro, thank you for receiving us. How are you?
Welcome to our field in Casablanca, which is one of the freshest parts of this region.
Pedro, let's talk about the soils. The soils of Casablanca, they're very particular. You have a fantastic cut here.
Casablanca is located in the mountain range next to the coast. So in Chile the types of soils are very common from the mountains. It is a granite soil, and this vertical cut that I have here shows you what granite soil really looks like. It is typical in the coast of Chile, which runs from the north to the south. We have another series of soils. If you look at the hills of our field, they go down towards the bottom of the land, and that is a type of soil that is called Santa Rosa. It's a deeper soil, a bit darker, and gives a slightly different condition. The interesting thing is that you can play with these types of soils in which you can plant different grape varieties in, because it'll be kind of like a game of when the grapes will ripen.
Can you show me it inside the cut?
Yes, come here.
Well, you can see it very well here.
Of course, this is a typical soil of the mountain range on the coast. You can see this is totally made of granite. The bedrock is down here, and it degrades very easily when it is at a certain level of humidity.
Roots can penetrate through that.
This is a granite soil. This is found at the bottom, but when you go from the bottom to the top, you find a soil that contains more clay and is a bit more red in color. It goes red from the top to here, and then it goes to more granite. Here it is purely granite.
This gives acidity and tension to the grapes, right?
Yes, and here it is a soil of low retention, and this helps make a wine with more concentration. It helps with salinity and freshness in the wines.
The main thing we find in the coastal mountain range is a granite soil. Here, in Lower Barca, above a certain height around Cote 80 and above, from that section upwards, it's all granitic soil. From that level to where we are here, there is an organic topsoil. And below us and downward, there are calcareous soils, marine soils. And obviously, in the flat parts there is clay soil.
The base of the calcareous soils is what gives you that freshness, tension and high acidity in the wines.
Yes, that's right. Obviously it's all of those aspects combined and more. Mainly, I would say the temperature is most important. But of course, the soils are very important in the life of the vines. In the soils there's a lot of oxygen, water, and rain collection, so these are rather deep roots. Like what you said, that gives characteristic to the wine, making it longer on the palate and more austere.
I am in the San Antonio Valley. Indeed, I'm inside the vineyards of Casamarin, an historical producer of this region that offers accommodation for visitors in little casitas, little homes, inside their vineyard. What a better place to talk about the viticultural processes and grapes of the Aconcagua region. Viticulture in the Aconcagua region has been developed in the recent decades, in the most part. This is particularly true in the coastal areas of Casablanca and San Antonio, where plantings date from the 80s and 90s. As such, it has benefited from modern and efficient practices, such as trellising and vertical shoot positioning, that help making the work in the vineyard easier, as well as enable an efficient use of water, which is needed to different extents in this warm and dry area. But no one best to talk about this than the producers. Let's talk to them. Viticulture in these conditions is not easy. We're in a very steep hill. I've seen the vineyards on the way up here very well. They're very steep. How do you work them all manually?
The entire part of the hill is worked manually. We have slopes around 30%. Terraces are made, and on the hills, we use an approach that when it's harvested, it has to be harvested while tied up with rope in some areas. These are basically the components for the most high-end wines. What this hill allows us to have are two sides. Here we are on the east side of the hill. We have viticulture on the eastern side and the western side. Both sides have different effects of concentration and maturity on the grape and quality in the bottle. In this part we have more Commoner and Cabernet Sauvignon.
In this eastern part, the sun reaches in the morning, the other side in the afternoon.
Exactly. Right now it's 3 o'clock, and we're in the shade. The hill gives it shade, which makes it another temperature and a new microclimate.
During the last few years, what has been done here is a transition to organic vineyards. So most of the grapes we have are now organically grown.
With certification?
With certification, yes. There's a part not yet certified because it's still in transition. So we have to wait a couple of years in order to achieve that. Viticulture here is a bit of a challenge due to the humidity in the area. We have varieties like Pinot Noir that tend to be a bit sensitive to mildew or botrytis, which are the main diseases here. The viticulture here is obviously irrigated. We have no dry viticulture, especially in the last 10 years. The historical average is around 300 millimeters. Last winter we had that amount, which was very good, but 2 years ago we had 80 millimeters only.
In terms of irrigation, Chile has restrictions. Can you explain to me what those are? They give you a few amount of liters that you are able to use per second, and with that you have already enough for the vineyard. How does it work exactly?
Here, water rights are separate from land rights. So if you've bought land in the last 50 years, it's not associated with the use of water. For example, you can buy land and then go buy the water rights off of someone else. So, you dig a well and it has a limited extraction of water for irrigation.
At the end of the day, here you guys depend on the rain. The melting of the Andes doesn't affect you since there's a mountain range. The rivers don't reach here.
Exactly. Only water from the rains and from the well.
Are the aquifers in this area also decreasing due to climate change?
Yes, it decreases substantially. This is one of the only valleys in Chile that doesn't have a river, so it has to be water from rain. If not, water from the well.
These are very unique terroirs. Our philosophy is to make wines that are signature wines, but always respecting the terroir. When we make wine, we don't think about Alsace or Marlborough. We think more about harvest times according to what we think is right. Also, we are very respectful to the contribution of the grape itself during its own elaboration. We try to work the wines with the natural things we have, rather than adding things to wine. But I would say that the styles are very unique. For example, the Sauvignon Blanc. There are some journalists that say this reminds me of this region, but there are others that try the same wine and say no, this reminds me of another region.
At the end of the day, it's whatever you like personally.
Exactly. But I would say it's a terroir that is very unique to this place.
There is a large diversity of grapes grown in the Aconcagua region. Although some autonomous varieties can be found here, most plantings are dedicated to international varieties, particularly Cabernet Sauvignon as the most planted. The Bordeaux grapes are favorites of the Aconcagua Valley, with Cabernet Sauvignon leading the mix, followed by Merlot and Carmenet. Casablanca has quickly established a reputation for white wines, particularly Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay, although some quality reds are elaborated in this area from Pinot Noir and Syrah. In San Antonio, alongside Pinot Noir, Syrah and Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc is the flagship variety, translated into wines of high acidity, medium body, and flavors of citrus fruits, alongside herbaceous notes and sometimes aromas of whetstones.
Mainly Cabernet Sauvignon, Commoner, and Syrah. We make very good Syrah. The only problem is that it is difficult to sell Syrah. We have Syrah in different parts of the hill and also at the highest part of the hill. It's a component of important lines for us, like the Laguna or the Gran Reserva.
You make multiple Pinots, Syrahs, and even Sauvignon Blancs. You don't make one of each with different levels of price and quality, I suppose. How do you differentiate them? Are they grapes from singular vineyards of a little more quality? Or is the elaboration process different for each?
Yes, the vineyard is 150 hectares. Half of them are Sauvignon Blanc and around 40% are Pinot. They are located in different places. For the most basic wines, those are closer to the valley, where there's a bit more warmth. There, the fruit is a bit rounder, the wine a little wider, warmer, a little more fruity. Perhaps it's less mysterious. It's a bit easier to drink, so it's more Casablanca. Then, if we move a little further towards the slopes, like where we are now, there's shorter soils, there's rock on the surface, and the plant is directly living on granite. Here it's a lot cooler, so there's lower production. You end up finding much more interesting grapes. There's a greater concentration, plus the granite soils are colder, so these give you a lot of verticality.
Mainly Pinot Noir, with 25 hectares planted in this field. We also have Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, as part of the main varieties planted here. But we also have Tempranillo, Pinot Blanc and others that we play with.
Those are the main grapes of Casablanca, mainly the whites, Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc, as they are the cold climate grapes. What about the ripening season? Is it long here in Casablanca?
Although Casablanca is a well-defined area, it varies depending on where you are. For example, here where we are, it's the coldest area of the valley. If you move a little north, the temperature increases. This area provides a little longer growing season.
Well, thank you very much for showing us this vertical cut and discuss the viticultural practices in Casablanca.
Our pleasure. I hope that you come back soon.
We will. You guys are very well known. In fact, you put Chilean Sauvignon Blanc on the map of high quality. But apart from the Sauvignon Blanc, which I want you to explain, you also grow other grapes. For example, you're introducing Riesling and Gewürztraminer, which are grapes from Alsace, from the cold climates of France and Germany. So you're introducing them here and they adapt very well, right?
Yes, indeed. As you say, Sauvignon Blanc. I think that 20 years ago, to think about producing these types of strains such as Riesling and Gewürztraminer, it was only for crazy people. In general, you bet on white grapes here in Chile, but it was a pretty accurate gamble. Aromatic strains at the time didn't exist, and there was very little Sauvignon Blanc. It was mainly Chardonnay, but we got wines worth of aging here. Wines came out with very clear, very deep acidity. They were wines very suitable for uncorking over time. This at the time was not common in Chile.
I am in Casablanca, the main town in the Casablanca Valley, in the beautiful Hotel Casablanca Spa and Wine. The association of the wines in the Aconcagua region to the vineyard location is as strong in this part of the world as in the most historical wine production areas in the old Europe. Obviously, the hot interior, mitigated by cooling breezes discussed before, is well suited for the production of serious red wines such as Cabernet Sauvignon, Bordeaux Blend, and Carmener. The gentler intermediate region towards the west benefits more from coastal breezes and is home to many historic Aconcagua wine estates, producing Chilean classics. Expansion is taking place on the hillsides of the coastal areas, and vineyards cooled by the Pacific breezes are now showing exciting potential for Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, and Pinot Noir as pioneering winemakers explore the cultivation of cool climate, white grape varieties. Let's talk to the makers about this.
Mario, we are in your room of beautiful barrels. You have 1,000 or so. Explain how you made the wines that we will taste later, in general.
Basically here we have around 1,000 barrels. There is a percentage of American barrels and French barrels, and within the barrels we work with different sizes and dimensions. 225, 300 and 400 liters, which basically makes the delivery of each barrel faster or slower. It also affects the aspect of micro-oxygenation. We have wine that we work on for 8 to 10 months in the barrel, 10 to 12 months, 14 to 16 months, and the most high-end wines we work on for 16 to 18 months. For example, for the Pinot, we try to have it in for no longer than 10 months, so the fruit isn't lost, but that depends on each year's harvest, because there is an evolution.
But that's once it reaches the barrel. What about before the aging?
All of the fermentations are done in stainless steel tanks. There are some lines of wines that are fermented in barrels. We also do fermentation in barrels. For the wines that are here, they are all high-level reserves. We do normal maceration for red wine for 25 days. For the higher level, wines can reach up to 30 or 35 days. In general, they're temperature-controlled fermentations at around 28-30 degrees centigrade. Although for the reserves, it's around 25 to 28 degrees, just because of the extraction work.
Well, Andres, we are in your barrel area, and we have one here made of stainless steel. Can you explain why you made this in stainless steel?
From the field to the tank, we try to show where the grapes come from. We do this to compare exposures, soil types, and see within the same variety the different characteristics each location can give us precisely. We have many micro-vinifications of 1,500 kilos. In this case, it's a white wine. We use these barrels only for whites. We have a small press that we use to get around 800 to 900 liters, and then we ferment it in different barrel formats. We have 400-liter barrels. We have traditional tiny barrels of 225, 228 liters, and in this case, we have a stainless steel 300-liter tank. Each one of these gives the wine different characteristics, and the idea is that when you start mixing, you get those different components. Stainless steel gives you that verticality, fruitiness, and very floral wines. It makes the wine more simple, but very fresh, and after a year of crianza, the level of the wine will rise.
These tanks don't allow evaporation nor oxidation in the wine. They are completely airtight.
Exactly. We fill them to the brim as far as we can, then we put on the cap. After that, it'll always be cold, with temperatures ranging from 13 to 15 degrees. So there are not great temperature changes and no changes in volume either.
Explain the production of the three main wines you have, starting with the Pinot Noir.
In the case of Pinot, we harvest quite early. We have moderate to low alcohols that are around 12.5 to 13%. In the winery, we use a lot of stems. Inside the tank, we have a person who is stepping on the grapes, but more than stepping to burst the grape, he's there to press so the tank doesn't fill with very few kilos. Until it starts to ferment, we don't use commercial yeasts. It's all native to represent the place the wines come from. Once fermentation starts, we get in and press in the tank again. After that, we have an extraction with the grape juice, which is produced during fermentation. During this, there's already alcohol, which gives it a little more tannin, more height, and makes it fill your mouth. This is essential.
Once in the barrel, how long is it there for?
Once in the 400-liter barrels, which oxygenate less, the evolution of wine is a little slower, which is exactly what we look for. Also, depending on the year. If it's a very warm year, we can bottle in December with 9 months of aging more or less. If it's a cool year with good acidity, we can last up to almost a year.
What about the Syrah?
For the Syrah, we usually have more of a mix. A mix of grapes that are destemmed and grapes with their stems. It's around the same amount of work, but for the destemmed, we do a little more assembly and pressing with the feet. The Syrah aging is usually up to a year and a half. After the second winter the wine is in the barrel, we start bottling.
I'm in the winery Terra Noble, and I'm with Marcelo Garcia, who is the chief enologist of the bodega.
Hello, Marcelo. Thanks for having us. How are you?
Very well. Thank you very much for joining us. I am going to complete 8 years in Terra Noble, which implies a certain change from the toys Terra Noble had. When I say toy, I mean the barrels and eggs. For me, these are tools that allow me to work on the fruit much better and preserve and respect what the vineyard is. Campo Casablanca is very exciting. The field is in the coldest part of Casablanca. Although we are experiencing significant climate change, the location allows having very fresh wine, fruity and with rich acidity. And yes, the wines go through a fairly cold fermentation process. For example, Sauvignon Blanc is at 9 to 11 degrees. This makes the fermentation very long, but still respecting the intensity and aromatic pressure.
Fermentation in different containers are always the same?
With Sauvignon Blanc, it's 100% steel. With Chardonnay, one part ferments in steel and the other in concrete. The percentages always change. Some parts are done in bigger barrels of 300 to 600 liters as well.
Fermentation in food for whites is like moving away from the barrel so that it doesn't have so much wood. That's the idea, right?
Part of it is the different contact surface. But also in the fouders we have an internal cooling system to ferment at a colder temperature than that of traditional barrels. The barrel generally ferments at about 18 degrees on average. It's more difficult to control the temperature, but here in the fouder it's between 13 and 14 degrees.
What about Pinot Noir?
We have 2 pots to make the Gran Reserva, which is called Algarobo. Part of it ferments in bins. The bins have a base of 1,000 kilos and are only used manually, sinking the skins gently. Some wines go with the skins, some with stems.
And after elaboration, you do some aging, right?
Yes, around 8 months. And then we also play with barrels of different toasting levels, some with very low levels. And then sometimes in concrete vessels as well.
The idea is to have different low-sized vats. They're vats of 2,000, 3,000, and 4,000 liters. The idea is to have each sector of Sauvignon Blanc in these vats.
Each sector of the vineyard in different vats.
Exactly. We harvest the vineyard when it's still very green. The majority is harvested when we think it's on point, almost ripe. The idea is to have a good repertoire of styles when the wines are finished. It's like a kitchen. I like to have condiments. We also leave some in the barrel. Part of the idea is to have Sauvignon Blanc in barrels, which will give it more enthusiasm and texture. In the case of Riesling and Gewürztraminer, the barrels are smaller, so, of course, I can't separate it as much as Sauvignon. We pretty much train our palate. We don't harvest based on numbers or grades. It's all berry tasting, and generally, we harvest Riesling when it's very crispy. When the Riesling has a very nice acidity that makes you salivate, that is when you have to harvest it. If you do it like this, it will give the wine a lower content of alcohol and a lower pH. So it's a wine that is suitable to drink with time.
You also make reds. You make Pinot Noir and Syrah. Let's discuss this in the barrel room.
Yes, let's go to the barrel room.
Well, we're in the barrel room, where you have some of your red wine, in particular a blend of Grenache and Syrah.
Yes, we have Syrah and Grenache. One of our trademarks is a blend of Syrah and Grenache. In this case, this has been here for 3 seasons aging in these barrels.
And then you have a Pinot Noir,
We have that too.
which you age in barrel.
Yes. We have 3 different Pinot Noirs which age from 12 to 18 months.
Are the barrels made of French or American oak?
French oak, but they are quite used. We don't like new oak very much, so we work with used barrels. This one, for example, is from 2012, so it's 10 or 11 years old.
It almost no longer gives it the toasted and vanilla flavor since they're worn out, right?
Exactly, but it does have that oxygenation role still. That adds some tertiary smells to it, which we like a lot.
I'm back in Casa Marin, where hospitality is religion. And I'm here to introduce the section that is always the best, particularly for the WineDOs team producing this documentary, as we will taste some of the best wines of the Aconcagua. And this time I have great company, Melissa Del Campo, who will accompany me on this very difficult task. Melissa, are you ready?
I am, you bet, Enrique. But you forgot to mention that we will also try the Aconcagua cuisine, and that is an important oversight on your part, as the food in this region of Chile is delicious.
That's right, you're totally right, Melissa. Let's go for it.
Let's go.
Well, Mario, Melissa and I are waiting for the important part. We start with a white.
Yes, we start with a white, the best white we make here. It's 100% Aconcagua grape. It's a mix of Chardonnay and Viognier, 60% and 40%. It's fermented in oak barrels. It ferments on its lees for around 6 months. Then it's around 3 to 4 months in bottle before reaching the market. There is no manolactic fermentation, 0%. One of the things that manolactic fermentation does in Chardonnay is it produces an aroma. It's a compound called acetyl, which has a market butter aroma. This is by style. There's people that like it and people that don't. With our style, we prefer a fresher Chardonnay with volume which comes from the barrel. We like a Chardonnay that'll give juiciness to the palate.
Aromatic.
Yes, it's quite complex on the palate and on the nose.
Yes, although it has hints of lime and grapefruit, there are also aromas of peach, which makes it more complex. Chirimoya as well, which is part of the characteristics of Aconcagua.
Yes, it does have that stone fruit.
Stone fruit, that's it. like peach. It's something around along those lines.
This is one of your high-end wines, which has a story behind it. Can you tell us about it?
Yes, this is the second high-end wine that we have. It's called Laguna del Inca, after an Inca princess that when her lover died, she cried in the Andes mountain range and made a river. The river she made was the Inca River, which was the color of the princess's eyes, green. It is a blend of Cabernet, Commoner, and Syrah. No predominant strain, which is the funny part. Everything comes from the hill, which has clay loam soils.
This has a much different aroma.
This is totally different. This is our second wine. It's a premium wine. It's seen oak for 14 to 16 months. It's a very specific work that's done in the vineyard. The same sectors that contain this wine have been composed for the last 10 years.
It has some very subtle green notes. In the background, it has wild fruits.
Yes, and it has a foresty aroma. The more complex aromas, there's also pencil, almost like graphite.
It's a much more structured aroma.
Yes, there is some tobacco.
The tobacco leaf is a descriptor, which is typical of our valley. There's tobacco leaf and tea leaf,
which you can feel more on the palate.
That's what I was going to say, in the mouth.
That makes me very happy because it's a descriptor that we use for this wine, although it has a very good acidity and it's very easy to drink.
This wine is very good.
One of our peculiarities here and of Aconcagua as a whole is that our tannins are sweet. They are always well-rounded. Rather than going for power and intensity, we search for complexity and finesse in wines.
Well, Mario, thank you very much. Wonderful wines. Thanks for everything.
Grateful.
Cheers.
Andres, we're in your tasting room, which you can't see, but this spectacular views of your vineyards down there. We're with Melissa to try a few of your wines. We're starting with a Sauvignon Blanc.
Yes, let's start with Sauvignon Blanc. The label is called CJ's Barrel. Most of the Sauvignon is done in stainless steel barrels. In this case, we have an 1800-litre concrete egg, which is where most of this wine is raised. 70% or 80% will be the concrete egg. The remaining 20 or 30%, depending on the years, is usually in stainless steel or any other barrels that we like to add on.
It's very green on the nose.
Yeah, it's green, yes.
The pepper.
It has a bit of pepper, yes.
Our intention is to make wines with the palate in mind, not so much the aromas. As a young country in winemaking, I think we've mistakenly focused on the aromatic aspects of Sauvignon Blanc, like adding mango or other fruits, which are very attractive, but doing this makes the wine on the palate remain a little simpler, very vertical, and less complex. So the idea here with the concrete egg is to have less participation of external elements such as the aromas or flavors of wood, but allowing an evolution of the wine through the little amount of micro-oxygenation that the concrete has. Although it still has a lot of contact with its lees.
The texture of the leaves and a bitter note is what I was noticing the most.
Yes, a little more body in the mouth too.
And it's long-lasting.
Well, the idea is to be able to eat with this wine. We have another Sauvignon, which is more simple, but the idea with this one is that you can eat something with it. We didn't want this wine to just be an appetizer wine.
The next wine is a Pinot.
This comes from a part of the vineyard that has a lot of inclination. They're very restrictive soils where rock emerges at the surface, There are 20 or 15 centimeters of soil, and then comes the granite. It speaks much more than what our position is. It's like Kingston within the Casablanca Valley. For me, it has much less fruity characteristics. Here there is much more whole clusters of branches.
You can notice that in the wine.
Of course, we're talking about 60–70% of whole clusters on average. It has notes of herbs and spices, which I find super attractive. And there is also some humidity, forest, mushrooms that seems to make it more pure and original than any Pinot.
I'm noticing herby notes, dry grass, and mushrooms.
Yes, zero fruit.
Here we usually serve it with duck.
With duck.
Yeah, it's a really good pairing. Having France in mind, it's a reasonable match.
Very well, Andres. Thank you for showing us everything and letting us try the wines. It was fantastic. Nice to meet you.
Thank you very much for the visit. So delighted to receive you.
Well, Marcelo, we're in the tasting of the 3 wines that we mentioned before, and I'm looking forward to them. We can't wait to try them. Which one is this?
This one is Sauvignon Blanc. It's a special Sauvignon. I've always liked this because of the aromatic intensity. I like Sauvignons that have herby notes. Also green pepper. But this is a Sauvignon that has always had something more. Casablanca is highly recognized for the fusion of white wines. This is an example of a more complex wine. This Sauvignon Blanc has had a percentage of Pinot Blanc all year. That's because Pinot Blanc gives the wine some flowery notes. It also gives it that structure that you find in Sauvignon Blanc. You want a Sauvignon Blanc of this level to hit you in the nose, but also for it to be powerful on the palate.
It is true that on the nose it's very aromatic, very elegant and complex. Every aspect that you were describing, I was noticing while you were explaining.
It starts with the fruit, then the lees, then goes back to the fruit.
Fruits and floral hints of citrus. On the palate it's robust and sits quite high. It's very marked. It's very pleasant. It makes you salivate. It calls for more food, or to keep drinking more wine.
What would you pair it with?
With a good ceviche, since we're on the coast.
A salmon ceviche.
Yes.
Lastly, your Pinot Noir, also from Casablanca.
This sector of the vineyard is also from Casablanca. It's a Pinot Noir which was first harvested in 2017, and we've made different variations with the aging. When we started, it was 1/3 in barrel, 1/3 in egg, and 1/3 in founder. I have been adding the presence of founder in the elaboration, and barrels some years. A large barrel with toasted notes.
Very soft color, translucent. Typical of Pinot Noir, right? It's live.
Very alive and super aromatic. When you were pouring the glass, you could already smell it.
Yes, that's true.
The line of wines in Casablanca are just very fresh and fruity. It's a bit of interference to the oak. Every wine has oak, but you still find the respect for each wine.
But it has an herbal component, or wild grass, I don't know, like wild forest or something.
Yeah, there's many marked aromas, like red fruits. There is forest and herbs like you said. It has an average of 35% of the different vinifications. This is the one that ferments in a good part in the bins and part in steel, but at temperatures of 22 or 24 degrees maximum. Also, it has very good acidity.
A lot of acidity, yes.
This is a wine that you can drink a whole bottle of during the summer.
Exactly, that's perfectly described. You could probably drink 1 to 4 glasses of this very easily, so a bit dangerous.
Exactly.
Well, Marcelo, thank you so much for showing us your Casablanca wines. I know you have others, but these were fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you guys. I hope you liked the wines.
So we are in Loa Barca, and we're gonna try one of the typical dishes of the local cuisine. And we have been suggested to come and try the local costillar, that is ribs. And they smell delicious. We're gonna try them.
It looks so juicy.
It's so good. And we have one of the wines that we haven't tried from Casamarin, but we have talked about it with the owner. That is a blend of Garnacha with Syrah. That is called Cartagena. And that I believe it matches and fits
Perfect
perfectly
pairing.
with this.
Good choice.
Dish. All right, enjoy. Well, we enjoy.
Yeah.
Felipe, we're at the moment where it's time to try the wines. Let's start with the Sauvignon Blanc, which is the wine that represents your winery. Can you explain it?
Of course, this is a Casamarin Sauvignon Blanc, cypresses. In the area where we planted this, the vineyard is surrounded by pine trees. That's why it's called that. It's our flagship wine. It's the most critiqued wine of the winery. It's received the most points. It's been ranked twice as #1 in the world in blind tastings. So basically this Sauvignon Blanc comes from a calcareous soil. Marine soil, which is what we saw in the vineyard. It has a little bit of vegetable notes. It has a little bit of lemon as well.
Like pepper.
Yes, like a pepper. It's very specific.
These smells are very much from this region. It has some passion fruit as well.
It is like what you were saying in the vineyard. It has some body. It has a good flow in the mouth. It's not only how aromatic it is on the nose, but also very acidic.
It's long-lasting on the palate.
Exactly. That's what we seek to find. A lot of elegance, a wine for aging. Let's continue with the Riesling. This one is called Miramar Vineyard. Why? Because it's the vineyard that's planted on the high ground. These are different soils. They are granite soils, which is the most common in the Chilean coast. In this case, since it's at an elevated point, it receives all of the ocean winds, so the plants grow very little.
You have that note of kerosene.
Yes,
But it's much more subtle on the nose.
Yes, it's less intense, but it's very elegant.
yes, it has a bit of gingerite. It has its flower notes as well. It has a bit of honeydew.
It's fabulous on the palate.
The nose is completely translated into the mouth.
What I like most is that it makes you salivate. You can't even tell that it has alcohol, and again it has that long-lasting touch of elegance.
Well, Felipe, thank you and your family very much.
A pleasure.
Cheers.
Thank you for the visit.